It's only been 100 years since women were allowed to even join the profession. And that's just starting off with gender equality, let alone all the other characteristics that come into it as well. When you're coming from, as like myself, from a lower socioeconomic background, that money is a big deal. It's like, oh, well, how am I going to become a lawyer if I can't even pay for my education? When I was growing up, I didn't see any lawyers that looked like me. I didn't have anyone to look up to, didn't have any role models. So the change has to come from leadership level. It has to come from the top. I've seen that where law firms are partnering with local schools and universities and colleges, and they're going in and they're building that kind of connection between the firm and the potential candidates as well. It's important that law firms also work on kind of like attracting talent by making their firms more inviting, by having by fostering like an inclusive kind of atmosphere.
Welcome to the Legally Speaking podcast. I'm your host, Rob Hanna. This week, I'm delighted to be joined by the wonderful Salma Maqsood. Salma is a commercial property partner at Thrings. She has nearly 2 decades of experience in residential development. Salma is the Junior Vice President of Bristol's Law Society, a social mobility ambassador for the Law Society, and founding board member of the Ethnic Solicitors Southwest Network. Salma is passionate about advancing social mobility and supporting the future lawyers from non-traditional backgrounds to achieve their ambitions within the legal professions. So, a very big warm welcome, Salma.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. And before we dive into all your amazing projects, experiences to date, we do have a customary icebreaker question here on the Legally Speaking podcast, which is, on the scale of 1 to 10, 10 being very real, what would you rate the hit TV series Suits in terms of its reality of the law, if you've seen it?
Okay, so Suits, I wish it were real and then I'd rate it a 10, but it's not. And reality is just not like that, unfortunately. I'd probably rate it, trying to be kind here, maybe a 2 or a 3 as to how it compares with really being a lawyer.
And with that, given the jest that goes with it, we're going to move swiftly on. I think you've justified your 2 or 3. So would you mind by kicking off, telling our listeners a bit about your background and career journey?
Of course. So I was born and bred in Bristol. I'm the eldest of 6 siblings.
Wow.
My parents, I know, there's a lot of us. It's fun and games growing up. My parents were originally from Pakistan, and my dad worked away quite a lot. He used to work for BT as a telecoms engineer. My mum had limited English, so from quite an early age, being the eldest, I kind of helped my mum like navigate the schools, medical appointments, and just generally kind of like life, and kind of be a translator between her and, well, everybody else at the beginning. And as we were just growing up in Bristol, I mean, this is going back many years, quite a interesting town, I guess, or city, I should say now, to grow up in. It was pretty clear, just kind of like right from the very beginning, that just being from a different background or an ethnicity, that this was actually going to be a bit of a problem for us. Even from a very young age, I kind of picked this up. And it's actually because of those challenges that we were facing just as a family, as part of the community, that I decided to study law. Actually, it was one of the reasons that I decided to study law. I was lucky enough to get through school and I studied A-level law, and then I went on to university because I found that I'd quite enjoyed the A-level law, and it was an interesting and a really good kind of like learning experience and an introduction into law. I went on to university, which was actually quite a big thing for me back in those times, because the social norms in those times, it was that people from the South Asian, or women, shall I say, from the South Asian community at that kind of age, girls would complete their A-levels and they'd go on and get married. But despite these expectations, I was really lucky, and I always think back and think about how lucky I was, because my father, he was just great. He's always given me this kind of unwavering support and kind of been an ally throughout my life to me. And he was like, no, just because it's expected, to get married, you don't have to get married. You really enjoyed the law. If you want to go on and study law, then, I'll support you. I'll stand by you, which was amazing. So I studied at the University of West of England, and then I went on to do my LPC. It was quite interesting because I think when I went on to do my LPC, that's when I realized that lots of people already had training contracts, and they were paid for training contracts by like law firms. And I didn't know about this. I didn't even know this was a thing, basically. So I kind of was a bit like, well, how did you get training contracts? And that's when I found out that actually lots of people had applied beforehand for training contracts, and they were now having their LPC paid for. And I was just like, oh my God, wow, I really missed out on this. But, we were where we were. After my LPC, I basically then spent several years looking for training contracts. And I say several years because it really was. I sent out I sent out hundreds of training contract applications, and I just kind of got to a point after a few years. I was like, it's just not going to happen for me. It's just not going to happen. Um, so I had kind of almost got to the point where I was just going to give up, actually. And then a friend of mine rang me from London and basically said, there's a training contract going at my firm, but you have to come and work as a paralegal first, and then you can go on and and then you'll be offered a training contract after that. So I moved from Bristol to London to go and do this training contract. I mean, one of the reasons really, it was because my parents and my family had supported me so much through my degree, and then through my LPC, and then even when I was down looking for training contracts, they were like, it's going to happen, just don't worry, just kind of hang in there. So I'd got to a point where we'd expended so much money, that I didn't really have a choice. It was just like, this is the kind of final hurdle. So I went over to London, and the salary wasn't a lot back in those days. You didn't have this minimum that you had to pay trainees or anything like that. So went off to London, and my brother and my family, basically, they actually financially supported me. They kind of like subbed me while I was there. Like, my brother paid for my accommodation, and my father would help out money wise and stuff, so I could actually like survive financially my training contract, which I did. It was hard. It was on my first day, he said to me, it's like boot camp. It definitely was like boot camp. It was really hard. It was really long hours. I really hope people don't have to go through this anymore, I just want to say, but it did make me the lawyer that I am today. And I qualified. Many years later, I finally qualified. I was expecting my first child at this time. I had thought my mind was, I'm going to qualify, I'm going to go to a magic circle firm in London, I'm going to bring in loads of money. I'm going to be able to help my family and kind of like pay them back. Not that they expect payment back, but for all their like love and support over the years. But yeah, there were other plans, and I'd wanted to be a property lawyer, and I couldn't because it all coincided with the property market crashing. And I didn't attend my admission ceremony either because I was pregnant and I didn't want to rock up with my bump. But on that note, I am told now that you can attend your admission ceremony at any point, so it is on my list of things to do. So I'm going to go back and do that. And then I qualified, basically.
And what a little journey there. And thank you for sharing your personal sort of rationale for why law and some of the challenges, because we'll come on to talk about the work you're doing to correct the legal industry, and it's great work, and we fully support that. But let's fast forward then to today, because you qualified. It took a lot of hard energy, effort, etc. to qualify. But for those that are less familiar, can you tell us a little bit more about the area of law that you specialize in today, and maybe some interesting cases that you've handled?
So okay, so I work in the commercial property sector, which is actually quite wide, it covers quite a lot. But essentially it's how do I put this? It's the legal kind of side of owning property, leasing it, buying it, selling it, and developing commercial land or buildings. And myself, I kind of I focus on the developing land and building side of it. Interesting cases that I've handled to date. I suspect that interesting for me is not the same as interesting for everybody else, but personally, because the kind of work I do a lot, it's a lot of it, especially over the last couple of years, it's been with developers around Bristol. So it's about getting involved with the legal side of it, helping them look at the ownership of the land, help review reports, etc. Is this land going to be suitable for the development they're proposing? Is it going to be safe? Is the land, for example, contaminated? And if it is, how do we fix this? And then kind of helping out on the lending side from the bank, helping with all the financial documents, which can be quite comprehensive as well. and kind of guiding all that process for guiding the developer through the process through the legal side of acquiring the land. And then once they've acquired the land, we can also help with planning, etc., and any kind of issues. At that point, the developer will then go away, build the land, and then if it's built into residential plots, for example, then we can assist with then selling off those plots. So it's kind of taking it all the way through. For me, it's so interesting going back to that. Over the last couple of years, because a lot of the work has been in and around Bristol, I quite like, just much to my children's dismay, when we're driving around Bristol, I kind of take almost like a sense of pride, where I've been involved in the legals as a part of the, just kind of like showing, having been a part of that changing landscape, and I'll point, oh, I was involved in that development. Oh, I helped with this. In particular, there's a large development. It's over 50 homes just outside of Bristol. Some of it has been converted into office units, which is currently quite, it's really quite, aesthetically pleasing. It's quite nice. We've got lovely landscaping. The developers thought about play areas for people and who move into that little development. And importantly, some of it, which is a requirement, some of it has been allocated as affordable housing as well. So to help people, to kind of get on the market, and also to as in social housing as well, to help provide homes for people. So yeah, I find all of that interesting. It's not as interesting as criminal law, perhaps, but for me, that's what gets me going. That's what I like.
Well, we like people who are passionate about what they do, and we can just hear the passion coming through your voice in terms of the area of law that you specialize in. And I love the fact that you're kind of taking your family around and telling them, "Mum did good, Mum did this, Mum did that." I love that. I love that. It's really, really good. Okay, let's talk about your recent-ish move to Thrings as a commercial property partner. Would you mind telling us a bit about what your role involves there, and how has your role changed from sort of associate days to sort of being in a partner role?
So being an associate is very different, I think, to being a partner. So when you're an associate, there's a lot of focus on kind of billing clients, bringing in clients, and kind of like hitting targets. I think it's a lot more focus on that kind of like entry kind of area into law. When you kind of move into heading up a department or being a partner, your focus changes a little bit because it becomes a bit more strategic. So is this the question that you're asking? I'm just checking.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm keen to know more about that strategic side, because it's good to make that differentiation, isn't it, between in terms of, associate, where you are doing that sort of, like you say, the billing, you're doing that sort of day-to-day work, and then you kind of make that step up to partner where there is probably more of a strategic overview. So yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so it's like making the strategic kind of decisions, having that vision as to where you want the team to be, say in like a 5-year goal perhaps, and then I kind of like to think of a 12-month goal as well. Where I want the team to go, what the future of the team is going to look like, any kind of areas that perhaps we want more training in, any kind of areas where we might want to expand over the next couple of years, what kind of clients do we want to bring into the firm, and are we looking after the clients that we currently have to the best of our ability? Are there areas where we can do better in, and does it align with the overall kind of plan and the direction that the firm is going in? So a lot of it is a lot of it is like strategic decisions, but then kind of day to day you have all the business development that you do, making sure that again, you're going out and speaking, because I think the most important thing really is actually to keep the clients that you have happy and make sure that you're offering them the best kind of service that you can. And then obviously, if we have the resources and the team, then you can go out and bring in more clients and work for them and give them a good service. So yeah, I guess the role has changed because my focus was purely billing, hitting my targets, making sure that I'm, and as an associate, learning and training a lot more, because when you're an associate, there's so much that you don't know. Not that I know everything right now either. I don't think anyone's expected to know everything, but there's a lot more there. Whereas as you kind of move over to the partner side of things, it's almost like a different side that brings like more development and change with it.
Do you know what? It's great, and I'm just thinking in my head. A lot of the associate role is working in the business, and a lot of the partner role is working on the business. You talked a lot about there, going out business development, growing the business. You're looking at all these other different things from a strategic point of view, and I think that's a good, clear differentiator in terms of as you rise up in seniority, you need to be thinking more commercially, more as a business owner, if you like, in terms of like the growth, the future of the firm, and I also like that you kind of reference retaining clients. So many people are transfixed on new business, new business. Of course, it's always lovely to have new business, but what's the best client? The one you already have, and actually maybe getting more business, more referrals out of them, offering them a hyper enhanced service so they really trust you, want to refer you, want to give you more business, etc., etc. So thank you for sharing that. Want to switch up a little bit and talk about a topic that we're passionate about here on the Legally Speaking podcast, and a lot of episodes in and around it, and I know you are too, and do some tremendous work and been recognized, rightly so, within the profession for it. But a high level to start, what is your current opinion of the state of diversity and inclusion within the legal profession?
So, I mean, it's a tricky question. It's a tricky question to answer sometimes, just because of the different hats that I wear. So for me, I mean, let's face it. I mean, historically, as you know, legal sector has been perceived as elitist for years. It's been exclusive, and obviously, it's going to take a lot of time, I think, to change this. I mean, kind of to put things into perspective, it's only been 100 years since women were allowed to even join the profession. And that's just starting off with gender equality, let alone all the other characteristics that come into it as well. So we've got like a long way to go. So in a very short answer, my opinion on the current state of diversity, it's not great, but the good thing about where we are right now is there's a lot more conversations happening, there's a lot more initiatives, there's a lot more interest in trying to shape that this changes, and that we get better at diversifying the profession, hopefully, quicker than what it has moved in the last 100 years.
Yeah, and we've had Dana Denise Smith come on the show, who's obviously created the next 100 years of women in law, and does some incredible things as well. I know another topic you're passionate about as an extension of this is social mobility. So, what is your definition of social mobility, and what do you see as the main barriers to social mobility within the legal profession specifically?
To me, social mobility, it starts off with where your starting point is as an individual, and then where you kind of end up. I'm sure that's not the technical definition, but that's how I look at it. And as for the main kind of barriers to social mobility within the legal profession today, I mean, I think one of the most significant ones is actually financial barriers. It's just the cost. It's the cost of education. And I know that there are changes being made now. I mean, the SQE has been introduced, and there's different kind of like routes into law. But I mean, I know it's like, just kind of from personal experience, that for me, one of my biggest barriers, it was money. The cost of the LPC, for example, back in those days. And I think it's when you're coming from as like myself, from a lower socioeconomic background, that money is a big deal. It's like, oh well, how am I going to become a lawyer if I can't even pay for my education? And I know there's loans out there, but there's also thinking that some people don't want to take out a loan and then have to pay it back afterwards. So I think this is definitely like a huge barrier. I also think it's perception as well. So again, I often speak to people, and myself as well. I remember when I wanted to study law, and you're kind of like almost told, in the nicest possible way, if there's a nice way to say this, that people like you don't get into the law. They don't look like you. Lawyers don't look like you. So I think that quite often people have a perception, even from a very young age, they're not looking at law as a profession, because depending on what school you go to, or what college you go to, or even where you might go to university, those options might not even be put in front of you. So I think that's also an issue. And then obviously, say you do decide to go into law, there's that difficulty in securing vacation schemes, internships, things like that. I mean, for myself, again, I talk myself, but I think this is, having spoken to other people as well, like it all comes from kind of networking. because sometimes, depending on your socioeconomic background, you might not know about how to go out and network and secure these kind of vacation schemes, or where to go for this help. And B, well, when you do go out and network, I mean, it's all that kind of like, how do I present myself? How do I talk to people? Am I going to be okay? That the whole imposter syndrome comes in as well. So I think there's like a lot of challenges, because where those options aren't in front of you, where the information isn't there, and where the guidance isn't there, because sometimes the guidance and the information isn't there from the beginning. You don't immediately think that you're going to go into a profession such as law. It's not something that's talked about enough. I mean, I don't think.
No, and again, it's great that we're having the conversation, and it's also, thank you for sharing the challenges and the barriers. And I guess one thing we try to focus on is not just the problem on the show, but also sort of think about looking forwards and solutions and what people are working on. So I guess as an extension of that, how can law firms, legal institutions better support individuals from underrepresented backgrounds in overcoming some of the barriers that you've just mentioned?
I think some of this is about just kind of partnering with maybe local schools and universities and colleges, because I think I've seen that where law firms are partnering with local schools and universities and colleges, and they're going in and they're building that kind of connection between the firm and and potential candidates as well. And it works two ways, because I think for somebody at school, if you have lawyers come in and they talk to you and they present this, wonderful opportunity of a career which you might be interested in and you might want to go into, then your mind has already opened to the possibility that, okay, this law firm has come in to my school, and they felt it important enough to come in and speak to us, and this is clearly a profession that we can consider. And then from the schools, from the firm's perspective, they're also kind of like almost creating a pipeline of future talent, I want to say, in an ideal world. And it's the same again with colleges and universities. And I think outreach work like that, with partnering with local schools, I think is actually quite a good way. Obviously, when I say schools, I mean, I'm with a focus on schools in areas where, in areas with low socioeconomic backgrounds, basically. I also think law firms have this, again, people have a perception of what law firms are actually like, and they can often come across as quite cold and uninviting, and not a place where somebody from an underrepresented background is going to feel welcome, or they're not going to feel happy, I guess. So I think it's important that law firms also work on kind of like attracting talent by making their firms more inviting, by having by fostering like an inclusive kind of atmosphere, and by targeting groups, like specified underrepresented groups as well, when it comes to recruitment, when it comes to vacation schemes. Perhaps have ones that are targeted to those groups, to make sure that that they're giving everybody an opportunity.
I love that. You give some really good examples and practical, tactical things that we can do. And nothing that you said there is overly hard, right? We just need to take the action. People need to go in and implement it. And it takes these thought leaders, these change makers like yourself to, start the conversation, drive these initiatives. And, we thank you for that. And I think, we will eventually get there if we all come together. Did you know that on average, legal professionals just like you are losing thousands every year due to inefficiencies and outdated practices? The good news? There's a better way. Cilo, the world's leading legal practice management software, can save you both time and money. With Cilo, you can automate routine tasks, reduce administrative overhead, and streamline client communication, all from one easy-to-use platform. Imagine cutting down on the hours spent on billing, invoicing, and document management. What would that mean for your bottom line? More than just software, Cilo is an investment in the future of your practice. And the best part, it pays off quickly. Cilo customers see a significant return on investment, with many reporting increased revenue and lower operating costs. So why stick with the status quo when you could be saving money and growing your practice with Cilo? Visit clio.com/UK to learn more and start your free trial today. Now back to the show. One of the things you were talking about there is obviously inclusivity, which is so important. And there's been a number of studies about, the leadership of law firms and what that looks like at the top, and perhaps the need for change. What strategies can law firms to adopt to ensure leadership roles, we've talked about the entry levels, are accessible to individuals from all backgrounds?
So one of the things that I think would be really helpful, and I know some firms already do this, is internal kind of like leadership programs, where almost a bit like, I guess I want to say graduate schemes, but where somebody comes in and from once they've got they come in as perhaps as a lawyer, or it's just or well whatever level they come in, but if they kind of say that, okay, this is what I'm looking to do, but I want to progress, this is where I want to get to, having like an internal leadership program which they can join, that can help equip them with the kind of skills, with the skills to basically be able to reach that position. I'm also a believer in mentoring. I really, really believe in mentoring, because I've benefited it from so much from it in my own career. But I think if there is, for people that want to go into this leadership roles, I think mentoring is really, really important. And I think there should be kind of almost, you can have an internal mentor in the firm that will also be your advocate, hopefully from one of the senior from a senior position above you, to kind of help you guide you through that process to also get to the top. But I also think it's useful to have somebody on the outside as well that can perhaps give you an objective view and advice on how to navigate the promotion system within your firm as well, because sometimes they might say things which necessarily somebody inside the firm may not think about, and it kind of gives you a more broadened view as well. And then you've got coaching as well. Once you're in the firm, maybe you can get some kind of coaching to help you get to those roles. And I also quite like targets, setting for firms to set targets. So to say that, okay, we're going to have this many people from an underrepresented background reach this role in this number of years, and then actually have intervals where they measure up to say, okay, where have we got to? If we haven't reached that target, why haven't we got to that target? And then revisit that initiative and see how they can make it better, and then kind of help that continued support.
Yeah, and again, great tips there in terms of creating the programs. We're huge advocates of mentoring on the show. It's been a recurring theme throughout our seasons to date, because mentors matter. And I also like that you talked about, I always talk about having your board of mentors around you, not just in your environment, but outside of your environment. And you gave a great example there of that. I just want to kind of switch back to social mobility, because you do some very high profile work related to this. What motivated you initially to become a social mobility ambassador for the Law Society, and what does that role specifically entail?
So when I was growing up, I didn't see any lawyers that looked like me. I didn't have anyone to look up to, didn't have any role models, and everybody I looked at, they all just looked the same to me. It was really lonely, and there was like loads of times where I thought, okay, right, this is clearly not for me. I am not going to make it. Even after I'd qualified, there were times where I thought, yeah, this is just, it just seemed like a constant battle. But I kind of persevered, and I did get there. So when I heard about the scheme, I was, and the social mobility scheme is actually, it promotes role models from non-traditional backgrounds who've actually, who've made it, so to say. So when I heard about the scheme, I took it as an opportunity to give back. I thought, right, okay, I'm going to be that person that I wish I had seen when I was going into law and throughout my career, my junior career in law as well. I'm going to be that person that I wish I had access to when I was going through law. So that's why I became a social mobility ambassador. The role itself, it's all about, it includes sharing. So the social mobility ambassadors, we all share our experiences, our challenges in the career, and any kind of tips that we picked up along the way. Just kind of inspire and be the role model to others that we, I guess, didn't have. And then we also kind of do some mentoring. We take part in the diversity access scheme, which I'm a massive fan of. And the whole aim of the ambassador program is to kind of show that regardless of whatever social background you come from, you can make it in law.
And it's so good. And I always say to people, once you reach teach or give back, and once you get to the top, don't forget to send the elevator back down. And I love the fact that you do that, right? And it's really inspiring for people to hear that, someone who came from your background is now giving out your knowledge, your support, your kind of words of encouragement and change. So it's great to see. And that's why we love having people like yourself on the show. But you keep busy because you're also junior vice president of the Bristol Law Society. So can you share some of the initiatives you've been involved in with that?
Yes, absolutely. So first of all, I just want to say before I go into this that it's really, really important for people from different backgrounds to join council and local law societies, because if you're not on council and if you're not on, these kind of on your local law societies or the kind of committees of the law societies, then your voice isn't in the room. And the reason why I say that is because when I first got involved with Bristol Law Society, one of the first kind of things one of my first projects actually was setting up the Bristol Law Society's Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Committee with my co-chair, who's Coralie McIver. And so we both kind of worked together to set up that EDI committee, which both of us are equally proud of, and we continue to chair over the last few years. Most recently, I would probably say that one of the initiatives that I'm actually quite proud of is that we ran an Islamophobia webinar in November last year, which is Islamophobia Awareness Month. And these kind of webinars weren't ordinarily run before, and I think people wouldn't even think about running one again. But if you're in the room, then it's something that you're thinking about, and reaching out to people that might not otherwise have related to the Law Society. And it's also informative as well to people that don't know about Islamophobia. We're all learning. So it was great. It was great to be a part of that as well. And then actually at the end of last year, again, Bristol Law Society I assisted with drafting a statement following the conflict in the Middle East. And I thought that was great because it was a statement to kind of support colleagues out there and to say, we're aware that you're struggling and, we would like to support you, and kind of ask them to coordinate with their, internal networks and their friends. And I thought that was also, again, I was quite proud of that as well, and being a part of the Law Society, Bristol Law Society, that is, doing that as well.
Yeah, no, and it's fantastic that you're doing all of this amazing work. LinkedIn I have a pair of socks on from LinkedIn, which is called on the left sock create, on the right sock conversation. And then what you're doing is exactly what the world's largest professional networking site is creating conversation to educate, to inform, to hopefully create change. And it's really great to see that you have. And by the way, you do all this on top of a stressful day job, as a partner in a law firm. So I really do want to give you your moment for this, because it takes a lot of dedication, and you people deserve all the recognition you get for the work that you do, because this is going to create a wonderful legacy, looking back hopefully in 200-300 years time on how the law has changed, and you would absolutely have been part of that. You're also the founding board member of the Ethnic Solicitors Southwest Network. So what's the network's primary goals and achievements to date? Would you mind telling us a little bit more?
Of course. So I would just like to say that the board is actually is a few of us individuals, all from different law firms across Bristol. What I love about this network is that it's a cross firm collaborative network, and that's kind of the theme that we've been building on. So, and the idea behind it was actually just to kind of bring together lawyers from Bristol and the Southwest, all that those that come from like diverse racial backgrounds, just to promote equality and equity. In both entering the profession, and then once you've got into the profession, then career progression as well, because it's all well getting into the profession, but once you get in there, we've already talked about progression, it can be really daunting and really, really difficult if you don't get that support along the way. Although we've been kind of like almost like an informal network for maybe a few years, but we rebranded this year. and we kind of launched this year as well in January. And so far, we've had like 4 really successful events. We had our launch event. It's July, and we've already had 4 events. We had our launch event, and then we had a Ramadan iftar event. And then we had an incredible panel discussion a couple of months ago. It was just fantastic, again, with lots of different law firms talking about what was working, what wasn't working, lots of engagement with everybody that attended. And then just very recently, we've had our summer networking party as well, which had a real focus on just networking, allowing people to kind of speak to each other, learn from each other. And it was incredible. It was great from that conversation going on. There were like some real alliances. People were very happy to talk to others about their journeys and share struggles and give advice. And it was just great. And I think for me that personally, the real thing has been, it's just been that the law firms across Bristol, a lot of them are really keen to get involved. So they'll get in touch with us and say, can we help? Can we offer you space? We'd like to collaborate with you. And it's that real interest that's been sparked this year. And I'm really hoping that as we grow, and as we get bigger and hopefully bigger, that these conversations keep going and we keep learning from each other, all to diversify the profession.
Yeah, and we're all for that. And you've given some, as I say, throughout this conversation, some really good examples and some great case studies. And it's going to be super helpful for our listeners. Just want to maybe dive in a little bit more detail. What EDI initiatives have you found to be the most effective in terms of fostering a more inclusive and diverse legal environment? And how do you ensure that these sort of EDI programs lead to meaningful and lasting change?
So the change has to come from leadership level. It has to come from the top. So once you've got buy-in from your senior leaders at the firm, and they are literally, they are pushing these initiatives through. That's where the start is, and that's where meaningful and lasting change. And that's how you get it, really. And again, I know a lot of people don't like targets, but I feel like if it's not written into the strategy of the firm and the growth of the firm going forward, if you don't have targets that, we're going to recruit, say, this many people from underrepresented backgrounds, we're going to promote this many people to this position, and this many people to this position, or we're going to go out and perhaps work with a local, a community group, or I feel like if you don't have those targets, then you have nothing to measure yourself against. And I think that these kind of targets need to be written at strategy level and then visited, and you have a focus group that basically actually works on those initiatives and those targets, over the X number of years, basically, and you're revisiting them quarterly, monthly, just to make sure that you're on target and tweaking things to make sure what is working, what isn't working. Because unless these conversations are happening all the time, and unless you're checking in with yourself and your firm, you're not going to know. You're not going to be able to make any change. And that change isn't going to happen overnight. So it's going to be like it's a long-term strategy, isn't it? So it's about making sure that those people continue to be invested, that there's continuity, so that people do leave, there's somebody else coming into that role, and that kind of those strategies, they're within that firm, and they continue to be a part of the framework of the firm going forward. Just as important as budgeting, for example. We all know how important money is. It should be given the same importance as that, because if you do, then it's right up there, isn't it? And you're always talking about it, and it's always there in board meetings, and it's always there. You're always talking about it, which I think is really important. And just on a more kind of like below that, I think internal networks are really useful as well. And I think it's really important that you have somebody from the senior leadership team or HR department, or somebody who can make real key decisions as part of internal networks, so that they're listening to the people, they're listening to people that are part of that network, they're taking on board what is being said, they can take back ideas, they can take back thoughts, and again, feed into key decisions when it comes to the firm's strategy or growth going forward. And I think that's that again, senior leadership input at that stage I think is really, really important. And then again, mentoring. And I think, we talk about mentoring one way, but then, perhaps senior leadership team can have reverse mentoring as well. And then that kind of like brings your focus onto the EDI targets, because as somebody, you've got that input in as well.
Yeah,
Just a
and
couple of things.
no, great things. And it's simple, isn't it? What gets measured get done. If you're going to measure something and track it, it doesn't matter what conversation it's related to. There's a higher chance that that's going to get done by writing it down, measuring it, making yourself accountable to it. You're more likely to reach that goal. So, really like that. Very practical, very easy to implement, and hopefully that's kind of creating that change. Salma, you've had a host of accolades. I'm just going to read out a few here. Bristol Property Law Judge 2021, shortlisted for Lawyer of the Year at the Modern Law Awards 2022, named UK Top Influential Muslims in Legal 2022, Top 50 Influential Muslims in Europe 2023. I mean, the list goes on. What legacy would you like to leave in the legal profession? And what are your plans for continuing to support future lawyers from non-traditional backgrounds?
So, what for plans for continuing to support future lawyers is actually just kind of continue to mentor, to continue to be visible, and most recently, my role joining the Law Society Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Committee is actually to work alongside them, because the committee advises the Law Society and its committee and the board on EDI and inclusion issues, and it sets the strategic kind of direction and framework for EDI issues in the profession across the country, ensuring a kind of like a coordinated approach across the law society. So I think that's quite to be at that level and a part of that conversation. I think when I can kind of help future lawyers and hopefully from non-traditional backgrounds, going forward, and also just continuing my role as part of the Ethnic Solicitors Southwest Network. And being available, because I'll have a lot of people who will kind of message me on LinkedIn and say, oh, have you got time for a chat? Can you help me? And I just kind of have like various, sometimes one-off mentoring sessions with people, and sometimes we might have maybe a few sessions. And I like to kind of continue that. And one of the things that I really, really like, I think I mentioned before as well, the diversity access scheme. I want to continue to be a part of that, because I just think it's so important. It's just, it's a program run by the Law Society to help people from underrepresented backgrounds, disadvantaged backgrounds, to get a fully paid scholarship for the SQE or the LPC, and then go on to get a training contract as well. And I just think that's amazing. So, I'd like to continue to be involved in that as well.
Yeah, no, it's a wonderful initiative, and I appreciate you sort of really shining a light on that, because that's the thing, isn't it? We want to give people access to information so they can make better informed career decisions, but also get access to getting into these professions that they aspire to be in. Sam, I've really enjoyed talking to you today, and I knew I was going to. And I guess we've crammed in a heck of a lot in a short space of time. But before we close, what would be your advice you would offer to law students or aspiring legal professionals who wish to specialise in commercial property law?
I think it's really important that if you do want to go into commercial property law, just don't think about just the law side of it. So you should go out, and I think you should join local property groups, property networking groups, to find out what is actually happening in the industry, to keep up to date with industry changes, to speak to local agents, again, to perhaps join any kind of networking events that local agents might have going, because a lot of what you do on the legal side of it, it really does feed in what's actually happening in the industry as well. So it's good to have all that kind of background knowledge as well. And if you do want to go into commercial property, I mean, it's a lot of reading to make sure you kind of stay up to date with the law as well. And again, there are legal property networking groups as well. You can join those as well. And if you wanted to, also get yourself a commercial property law mentor. And I promise you, it's a lot more exciting. Commercial property law is a lot more exciting, I think, than what people think it might be. But I really do think it's important to have that commercial awareness and know what's going on in the industry, as well as stay up to date on top of all the legal work and legal knowledge that you would need in any area of the law that you went into.
Yeah, and I think the benefit of having that commercial acumen is obviously you understand your clients more, just in terms of their ways of thinking and what they're trying to execute with market trends and market swings and everything else, in addition to obviously being their legal counsel. So, yeah, love that. And if our listeners would like to learn more, as I'm sure they would, about your careers, a lot of the initiatives that you've mentioned here today, networks you're involved with, your current firm, where can they go to find out more? Feel free to shout out any website links, any social media handles. We'll also make sure we share them with this episode for you too.
So the Law Society's webpage is really good. Lots of information on there about the Diversity Access Scheme. I'd invite people to go in and have a look at that. On the Social Mobility Ambassadorship on the Law Society webpage as well, there's information about who the social mobility ambassadors are, and you can ask them questions. You can get mentoring from them. So do check them out as well if you want to know more about Thrings and the work that we do. Please do have a look on our website, and if anybody wants to get in contact with me, I mean, I'm only on LinkedIn, so please feel free to drop me a message on LinkedIn. Very happy to help and answer any questions.
Well, there you have it, folks. Thank you ever so much, Salma, for joining us today. It's been a real pleasure having you on the Legally Speaking podcast. Wishing you lots of continued success in your career and future pursuits. But from all of us, over and out. Thank you for listening to this week's episode. If you like the content here, why not check out our world-leading content and collaboration hub, the Legally Speaking Club, over on Discord. Go to our website, www.legallyspeakingpodcast.com, for the link to join our community there. Over and out.